On July 23, the nation witnessed a moment that both ignited praise from a few and stirred deep concern from many more. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took his pen and signed his name to a recommendation that has already begun to ripple across the medical and political landscape. That recommendation, a formal advisory to remove thimerosal, a preservative long used in influenza vaccines, from all such vaccines administered across the United States. It is a decision soaked in controversy. Not because thimerasol's name is unfamiliar, but because the debate surrounding it has been raging for decades. Thimerosal, a mercury-based compound used for decades as a preservative in multi-dose vials of vaccines, has already been phased out of most childhood vaccines. Its role was never to harm, but to protect, used to prevent contamination and preserve the integrity of vaccines in storage and use. And yet, here we are, years into the 21st century, revisiting a scientific ghost that many believed had already been laid to rest. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has long been a divisive figure in public health. His name, his lineage, his voice, they carry weight. And now, as Health Secretary, that weight has transformed into power. But with great power comes great responsibility. When he affixed his signature to that document, he didn't just make an administrative call. He sent a signal, one that has emboldened vaccine skeptics and startled the medical establishment. The origins of this recommendation trace back to a single voice in a committee room. Lynn Redwood, a longtime critic of thimerosal and a former leader of Children's Health Defense, a group founded by Kennedy himself, stepped forward at the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices meeting held June 26. There, she voiced her call once more: eliminate thimerosal, even from influenza vaccines, the final stronghold where it is still commonly used. It was a familiar argument. One based not on new scientific evidence, but on long-standing suspicion and discredited fears. Fears that thimerosal causes neurological damage, fears that it's linked to autism, fears that have been thoroughly, repeatedly, and decisively refuted by study after study across the globe. But in today's climate, fear doesn't need facts. It only needs a platform. The ACIP meeting grew tense. Physicians, epidemiologists, virologists, those who've spent decades studying vaccines, raised their concerns. This was not a silent room. This was not consensus. In fact, the vast majority of the medical community rejected the need for such a move. They understood the optics. They understood the danger of implying risk where none exists. To remove thimerosal now, they argued, is not a matter of science. It is a matter of symbolism, a concession to misinformation dressed as progress. Yet, despite this resistance, the vote was cast. ACIP members, in a surprise move, advised against recommending vaccines that contained thimerosal. It wasn't a ban. It wasn't a removal from the market. But it was a statement, and statements, in this world, matter as much as policies. The message was clear: thimerosal, long cleared by science, was now being marked by politics. Kennedy's approval of the recommendation didn't come in a vacuum. It came amid rising vaccine skepticism, amplified by years of disinformation and deepened by political divides. His signature wasn't just administrative, it was symbolic. It aligned with narratives pushed by the very groups he once founded and championed. It blurred the lines between public health and personal ideology. And the medical world took notice. Pediatricians, infectious disease experts, public health officials, they watched with furrowed brows and shaking heads. Many issued immediate statements, warning of the long-term consequences of such a decision. They weren't defending thimerosal for the sake of stubbornness. They were defending trust. Trust in the scientific process. Trust in the institutions that vet and verify. Trust that recommendations will be made from evidence, not from fear. Thimerosal has long been a scapegoat. In the early 2000s, concerns about its mercury content led to its removal from childhood vaccines, not because it was proven harmful, but to reassure the public and maintain confidence in vaccination programs. The decision was one of caution, not confession. And yet, even then, the scientific community made clear, no credible study had ever found thimerosal to cause harm in the quantities used in vaccines. What Kennedy's move threatens is not the chemical compound itself, but the precedent. The idea that a scientifically sound component can be abandoned under pressure. That the rigor of medical consensus can be swayed by sentiment. That decades of research can be overshadowed by a single headline. The implications go beyond thimerosal. If this is the standard now, where personal ideology can reshape public health policy, what comes next? Which ingredient, which vaccine, which treatment will be targeted next under the guise of caution, but without the backing of science? The influenza vaccine is not trivial. It saves lives every year. For the elderly, for the immunocompromised, for young children, the flu is not a minor inconvenience, it can be deadly. Thimerosal allows the production of multi-dose vials, which are more efficient, more accessible, and more affordable. In many rural clinics, in lower-income communities, these vials are not a preference, they're a necessity. To remove thimerosal from all influenza vaccines is to potentially reduce access. To increase cost. To create manufacturing challenges where none need exist. All for a threat that doesn't exist. All for an ingredient that has done more to protect than to harm. The scientific consensus remains unchanged. Thimerosal is safe. The World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all have reviewed the data, all have reaffirmed its safety. That hasn't changed. But public perception, that's a different battle. Kennedy's move may win him applause from certain corners. It may be seen by some as a triumph of caution. But in the long arc of public health, it risks becoming a symbol of something far more dangerous, the triumph of misinformation. Science demands vigilance. It demands humility. But above all, it demands truth. And in a world already battling mistrust in vaccines, in doctors, in science itself, every decision matters. Every signal carries weight. What we needed from the health secretary was clarity. What we received was ambiguity. What we needed was leadership rooted in data. What we received was deference to doubt. This is not how we build confidence. This is not how we fight disease. This is how we risk it all. Thimerosal may be phased out, but the consequences of this decision are only just beginning. Public confidence is not easily earned, and it is dangerously easy to lose. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has made his choice. Now, the nation must grapple with its impact, not just on vaccines, but on trust, truth, and the future of science-based public health.